Hey my lovely YouTubers, it's me, Morgan Tracy J, coming today to talk to you guys about a question I recently got on my website, hisdaughter'scloset.com, and I want to go ahead and make a full video about it because I just want to answer this question, alright? So the question was, how do you know that your calling or your life calling is from Jesus, okay, or is from God? How do you know that it's from God? But then first off, how can you detect that it is even your calling? What if it's just a hobby? What if it's something you just decided to pick up like 2 weeks ago and now you feel like it? Like, how do you know? And so that's what I'm going to answer this question in this video, okay? So first off, before we get started, I want to just let you guys know I love you so much. So be sure, if you're already a subscriber, be sure you have already went to hisdaughter'scloset.com because there's a lot of great things for you ladies out there that you want to get your hands on. Not only freebies sent to your email, and you're just getting first dibs on a lot of things that I'm doing, okay? All right. So anyways, let's get into this video. First off, the one thing I'm going to address first is, how do you know your calling, okay? How do you know your calling? First off, honestly, how I knew my calling was, God had already been showing it to me years and years prior, but I was not in a great walk with God, and so I did not feel like I was qualified for the position. And so the first thing is, you're going to feel unqualified for the position. You're going to think it's too big and that you're unworthy to even walk into that thing. God may call you to do something and it's way bigger than you've even imagined. And the second thing is, it could possibly scare you. You will feel unqualified and it could scare you, okay, literally, and be like, this is too big, I don't know about this. Honestly, that's kind of how I experienced it. Okay, also then another thing that came up with this in my, like, when I started to think about how did I know it was my calling, I felt unqualified, it scared me, and lastly, I ran. I ran for the hills. Like, I didn't want it because I was unqualified. I was scared, and I just didn't think this was mine. I just ran. And so I ran from God for a while. I just did not believe that that was mine. But also, too, my heart was different back then. And so my heart wanted other things. You know, I went to college for a biology degree and to eventually become a physical therapist. That's all I wanted to do. I didn't plan to get into ministry, and that was never my goal. And so when God was trying to reroute me, I wanted to stay on the course that I wanted to stay on. And so how I knew it was my calling is, I felt unqualified. I was scared of it, and I ran from it. That's how I know that was my calling. Because anything that is in God is big, and it's also going to be tested. Okay, and I didn't want to go through that big thing, and I didn't want to be tested because my faith and my walk was nowhere near it should have been for God to have showing me that stuff. I felt like that ain't for me. Even when I would get visions, I would think, girl, why are you thinking of stuff like that? Like, that's not even you. You don't want that, you know? So obviously it was God trying to like ease me in and be like, girl, come this way, but I didn't want it at the time. So that is how kind of I knew it was my call, like what my calling was, because eventually God started to change my heart, and I started to do that every single day without even realizing I was doing it. I remember I'd be in my apartment and I would just start preaching in my apartment. I remember I had a prayer journal, and I would write in that every single day, and it would be like letters or messages to God, I guess. And I would write about my feelings and my fears and the areas I was falling short. And so me not only writing every day, eventually started just to speak in my living room, because I started to pray out loud when I was alone, like real powerful prayers. That was easing me into my calling. I didn't see it at the time though. First off is, how do you know it's from God is, you got to know why you're doing. What is your motives to doing it? If your motives is just for financial gain, it's just for you, it's just to make you look better, to make you look prestigious, then that may not necessarily be from God. Because God is always, the why to it with God is always to serve others or to help others. See, Jesus Christ was God, and he even came to serve, okay? He was here to help others. He came for the sinners. And so when our callings, even if it's someone in graphic design, even in music, our callings are supposed to help others. It's not just supposed to be for personal gain. And so that's the first thing you need to check. Check your motives. Why are you doing it? The next thing is, how do you plan to do it? Okay, if it's from Jesus, it's always going to be routes that is going to glorify God. So if you're saying you're going to do all these crazy things that are going to be obviously and blatantly against God, then maybe that's not from God, because it's going to show your character. If it's something you're willing to go against, if you're willing to backstab people and talk about people and to be jealous and have bitterness and to to do things behind the scenes and very secrecy, then maybe that's not from God. Okay. Also too, something else is, how do you know your calling is from God or is from Jesus, or they're truly calling you to whatever it is you're doing? It's going to be an inner fulfillment that it doesn't make sense to the naked eye. Like, if I could just tell you, I can't even get it into words how amazing it feels, but the very first time I did my public speaking of a sermon. I had already been doing public speaking for 2 years before that over science research, because I was a biology major in college. I had already been doing 2 years of it. Didn't feel anything. But the very first time I ever spoke the word of God to a congregation, something shifted in me. I remember I got in my car and my hands were shaking. It was a feeling that I wanted to cry, but I couldn't cry. But I was on the verge of crying. But God was like, "It's not a time to cry. It's a time to praise. You've just stepped into your calling. You just stepped flat into it, finally. And now you can experience how it truly feels to be stepping into your calling." And guys, it was amazing. But what I want to say is, you can't just base everything off of feelings, because if you're called to something, God is going to test it. And how He tested me is He took the feeling away. So I would get up and I would do a powerful sermon, and I would go back to Him, and there would be no feeling. And then I would start to doubt, God, is this my calling? Is this really it? Maybe I was tripping. Maybe I went the wrong route. I would have all those thoughts, but in honest reality, God needs to take His feelings away sometimes so we don't grow reliant on that. Like, we need to feel something. And so I remember one time, finally, after going without still speaking, but not feeling like that fire I once had for God, I remember one time I spoke and I got in my car and that fire was back. And I remember I was just like, "God, I'm sorry for ever doubting this calling. Like, man, I'm so fulfilled." And so how you know what you're calling and it's from God, it's obviously going to be tested. It's not always going to be about how you feel, but it's going to be about the hearts and the lives of others, who you impact through the word of God, okay? That's what it's going to be. Another thing is how you're going to know what your calling is. You're willing to do things for it that maybe you wouldn't be willing to do other things. You're willing to stay up all night for it. You're willing to lose sleep over it. You're willing to just to do things out of the norm. Like, it's crazy. There's times I can be working and I'll look up and I haven't eaten all day. There'll be times I look up and it's 4 o'clock in the morning, but I've been so fulfilled because I'm doing what God has called me to do that I didn't even realize that I had missed something. So that's what I'm saying. It's going to put an inner fire in you, and it's going to fulfill you. And the word I always say is euphoria. Like, it's going to be so euphoric. Like, I can't even explain the feeling. When you step into your calling, oh, sweetheart, you will be fulfilled. But also, you have to always surrender that back to God and make sure that is God. Because a lot of times, if we don't, it could start becoming us. Our views, our desires. And it's happened to me before also. And so I'm speaking from experience, because I've even went through that, where I had to continue to surrender it back to God, because if I didn't, it would become me, and it would become my motives and my desires and my views, okay? And so that's why we have to be really cautious with this thing. But also, if it is your calling, if you feel like some of these like little tips hit home for you, then what I tell you to do is take it to God in prayer. Pray about it. Lay it down at His feet. There were times I've had to literally lay my entire ministry down at God's feet and not look at it for a couple weeks. Literally just lay it down, not look at it for a month, not look at it. So I could make sure I was getting filled back up with God. Not always just focusing on the ministry part, but also focusing on getting fed by God, okay? And so, that's just my little spiel on, is your calling, how do you know what you're calling in? Is your calling from Jesus, okay? Or is your calling from God? And that was just my little tidbits. But whatever you got from this, make sure you take it back to the Father so you can get your own personal revelation on it. Because if someone would have told me this years ago, "Hey girl, it's the thing that you running from. It's the thing that you feel unworthy about. It's the thing that God has shown you, but it scares you because it's too big." If someone would have told me that, I probably would have still kept running, because I still wouldn't have felt worthy enough to do it. I still would have felt too afraid to step out into that area, because I didn't want to be judged and I wasn't clean enough to do it. And what I want to tell you is, God is going to call you and you're going to feel very unqualified. He is going to show you things that are going to scare you because they're so much bigger than you. All right. You're going to encounter those. But how you know it is from God is because it will be tested, because it will glorify Him. And lastly, it will equip you and it will fulfill you in a way that nothing on this earth can ever fulfill you. Okay. And so that is my whole message on knowing your calling, and is your calling from Jesus. I love you guys. Be sure to like and subscribe and also comment. But also go follow me on all my social media sites. All right. And I will see you in my next video. Bye. I love you. Check out that calling. You better find your calling. You better find that calling. Lord, what is your calling? Come on. You want it. It's so beautiful. Anyways, bye.